Okay, I think we are officially recording, if I'm not mistaken. So once again, welcome. This is a publicly noticed meeting of the Pacific Fishery Management Council's advisory bodies. Advisory body members should use the raise hand feature if they would like to speak, and will be given priority for doing so. And just as a reminder, the raise hand button can be found in the reactions section at the bottom of your screen. And as time allows, which we expect it will, we will be able to take questions from non-advisory body members as well. And there is a public comment period scheduled for 3:30 p.m. or immediately following agenda item C. And we just ask that folks use the chat feature in Ring Central for logistical questions, to post links or other helpful information as it supports the conversation today. But please try to avoid using it for super substantive questions or comments, just so that things don't get lost in the shuffle. We want to make sure we capture as much of that as possible. And with that, I believe I will turn things over to Tommy Moore, Chair of the Ecosystem Work Group, for the agenda overview and any opening remarks.
Great. Excuse me. Thanks, Gilly. And thanks, everyone, for coming out again. For those who were here on Wednesday for our first of the project calls, format for today will be very similar, of Gilly providing an overview of the project, and then some detailed discussion around specific aspects of the project, followed by kind of more broad discussion of general concerns, and thoughts, and then we'll move into kind of the information needs, advisory body roles, and things of that sort. And yeah, and given that we have over 30 people on the call, I think we'll skip doing vocal introductions, and if folks want to introduce themselves in the chat, that would be great. Just to save a bit of time, and since this is more of an informational meeting than a in-depth working group, and I recognize most of the names on this call, not everybody, but quite a few. So yeah, and if you're uncertain, feel free to ask a question if you don't know who someone is or need more details. And with that, I will stop rambling and pass it back to Gilly for our kind of recap of Project 2.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Tommy. And as we get started, if folks do have questions as I move through these slides, feel free to jump in at any juncture, or if I may not get to see hands as they pop up, or I know Tommy's also going to be keeping an eye on the raise hand queue. So, but if for any reason if I keep prattling on and there's something that you'd like to make sure gets addressed before we leave the slide, feel free to jump in at any juncture. And so with that, I was just going to we talked about, as mentioned just now, we did do a similar meeting on Wednesday of this week regarding IRA project number 1. And that included this sort of larger overview of just the IRA projects in general, sort of a higher elevation or altitude. And so I apologize that I thought it might be helpful to just run through that again on these next couple of slides, just as a quick sort of orientation or level setting. And so for folks who were here on Wednesday, feel free to, sing along or yeah, anyway, so people will be hearing this for the second time in some cases, but just to quickly review, folks may already be pretty familiar with the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, as it's often abbreviated, but just by way of background, or in case it's a helpful refresher, IRA was a budget reconciliation bill that was signed into law in August of 2022 and included historically large investments in climate resilience, climate mitigation, and climate adaptation across multiple federal agencies. And of the bill's hundreds of billions of dollars in climate and energy related spending, 3.3 billion was provided to NOAA. And within that, 1.2 billion of that was dedicated to National Marine Fisheries Service. And of that 1.2 1.2 billion, $20 million was set aside for regional fishery management councils, such as the Pacific Council, to access via a grant process. And in order to qualify for these IRA funds, the grant proposals submitted by councils to NIMFs needed to be for activities that contribute to either or both of the following: the implementation of fishery management measures necessary to achieve climate-ready fisheries by improving climate resiliency and responsiveness to climate impacts, and or the development and advancement of climate-related fisheries management planning and implementation efforts, including those in support of underserved communities. All 8 councils applied for and received funding, and the Pacific Council received funding for 3 projects for a total of just over $2 million spanning the next 3 years. All project funds must be committed by the end of 2027, so we're now at almost exactly the 3-year mark for implementing these projects. And each of the Pacific Council's proposals have their origins in or draw heavily upon the Council's existing fishery ecosystem plan potential future initiatives, as well as some of the priorities and follow-on activities that came out of the Council's Climate and Communities Initiative. And again, feel free to holler at any juncture if any questions come up. And just ever so quickly on the 3 projects that the Pacific Council has received support for, I just wanted to mention that the original project proposals as submitted to NIMFs in the spring of 2024 are available as a PDF on the meeting notice pages for each of the kickoff meetings, including today's. So if anybody hasn't already come across that, it's there on the meeting notice page on the council's website, and also appears in the September briefing book under agenda item C3, I believe. And so the 3 projects are Project 1, which we're sort of shorthanding as Adaptive Management Response. And we may change that because we had a conversation on Wednesday where it might be more appropriate to call it Adaptive Capacity Response. So these are definitely works in progress. And that kickoff meeting was a couple of days ago on Wednesday, December 11th. And again, it was also recorded. So we'll make sure that recording is posted on the council website here in the next little bit, by probably next week, so that anybody can tune in and listen to it if they haven't had a chance to already, or if they weren't unable to attend on Wednesday. Some fine holiday viewing, I'm sure. Project number 2 is today's Community Resilience Decision Support Tools. That's what we'll be talking about this afternoon. And then Project 3 is developing climate-ready fishing methods that mitigate bycatch of non-target associated species in a changing environment. And we're sort of nicknaming that bycatch mitigation and highly migratory species roadmap support. And that kickoff meeting will be happening next Tuesday, December 17th, also starting at 12 noon. And just real quick, it may be helpful, we're thinking, just to sort of view these proposals as basically grant applications or grant proposals, which is essentially what they are. It was a grant process by which they were funded, and where NIMFS is the entity that is issuing the grants and the council is the grantee, or of course the recipient of the funding. And for the purposes of these kickoff meetings, the objectives and all the work described on the next few slides are based almost entirely on the content of the project proposals as they were submitted to NIMFS. And while we've started to discuss how the work might proceed and unfold and some of the more detailed bits and pieces, additional details will still need to be more fully fleshed out in consultation with advisory bodies, especially the EWG and the EAS, who are going to be the lead advisory bodies on these pieces of work. And that's what these kickoff meetings are all about, just starting with this series of conversations, and then also following on from here through regular updates to and discussions with advisory bodies broadly and with the council. So with that, sort of just background information, I will now just run through an overview of IRA project number 2. And I'm thinking that this will probably be a pretty informal conversation today, or even a bit of a brainstorm, which is, I think, like, this is an opportunity for people to just ask lots of questions and clarifying questions or maybe more technical questions that I probably won't be able to answer, but it would be great just to capture those questions. And I have a few slides here to start us off, but please, of course, feel free to jump in anytime. And if it makes sense to folks, I'll just run through the slides here, and then we can also return to any of them for further discussion or additional details. And I think some of the goals for this discussion could include, I think Tommy mentioned some of this as well, just learning more about what number two is, perhaps a discussion of roles, responsibilities, information needs, and expertise requirements for the project, clarify any timeline questions for the 2025 year at a glance and possibly beyond. Although anytime we get more than a couple of months in advance, it's sometimes hard to get too specific. Maybe review any next steps for formalizing work plans, and then, of course, ask and try to answer any questions that folks may have. And again, to ask a question, you can raise your hand under the reactions button at the bottom of your screen. And just a note that afterwards, you just need to go back in and lower your hand because it won't do it automatically. But and with that, I will get started. So project number 2, community resilience decision support tools, just as sort of like a general problem statement and sort of the proposed approach. This is not necessarily part of the project description, but just sort of trying to distill what we think the problem might be. Just that climate change is, of course, driving changes to the availability and distribution of council-managed resources, as well as resources and systems outside the council's purview. And this can and is increasing the vulnerability of West Coast fishing communities. And while the council has some great tools to help it better understand the relationship between climate change, community resilience, and vulnerability, and the impacts of its decisions on fishing community resilience, it would benefit from more and better integration of these tools, as well as the development and use of potential new ones that can help to foreground this kind of information in the council's decision-making processes. So the proposed approach, or sort of just thinking around this, is that we have an opportunity here and some support for improving the council's ability to make decisions that increase fishing community resilience in the face of climate change. And this would include the consideration of tools, products, and processes needed to respond to potential future ecosystem states resulting from climate variability and climate change. And that's a big reason why this project is, I think, has a very close connection to the outcomes and the results of the Climate and Communities Initiative's climate scenario planning effort. So just real quick, again, this sort of just lays out some of the core bits and pieces of what we think the project will be. And the primary aim of this project is to develop tools and a decision framework or other decision support tools that would allow the council to more explicitly consider and understand how its management proposals and decisions, or management proposals that become decisions and actions, affect West Coast fishing communities. And it connects most closely to potential future FEP Initiative 2.6, which in turn seeks to address a goal of the Climate and Communities Initiative to, quote, develop strategies for increasing the resiliency of our managed stocks and fisheries, end quote, in the face of near-term climate shifts and long-term climate change. And I would also note here that regarding the analysis of council management processes and their impact on community resilience under climate change, the climate scenarios developed as part of the Climate and Communities Initiative will, I think, really help to inform the work done under this project. And a key outcome would be for the council to more comprehensively understand the impacts of its management on community resilience, including, and I think this is maybe where the rubber might really hit the road, including the ability for the council to identify actions that could be taken to proactively bolster or improve community resilience. And as noted in the narrative for potential future FEP Initiative 2.6, which is the basis for this project, there would also, as part of this, need to be a clear delineation between actions that are within the council's authorities and those that are beyond it, because, of course, there will be things that could be talked about that would fall under both categories. And another thing I just wanted to flag here on this slide is just the connection between this project and the council's equity and environmental justice work, and particularly the NIMF's regional implementation plan for the EEJ strategy. And I think it's safe to say that all three of these IRA projects have linkages to equity and community resilience. But the focus within Project 2 here on understanding the impacts that council actions may have on both the vulnerability and then the flip side of that, the resilience of fishing communities, I think is extra strong in this one. And moving on to the next little bit. So this is these points 1 through 4 here on the screen are, I wanted to include these. This is taken directly from the project proposal and just sort of goes into a little more detail, not a ton of detail, but just for sort of framing some of the conversation today, perhaps, just sort of some of the components of what implementing this project could include. And these lines of work are in turn adapted from the narrative for FEP Initiative 2.6. And as you can see here, just starting with kind of a review of a sort of an understanding of attributes that can be used to understand community vulnerability and ways to assess human well-being in and the resilience of fishing communities. And this is something that could be further elucidated by, I think, a sort of an audit of existing indices or tools or dashboards where some of this information is already being collected and better understood. And then that can then feed into the number 2, which is the development of conceptual models for how the council can affect or may affect these attributes. And then, and again, this with an eye to thinking about how to make this information more explicit in the future. And then from there, identification of current or potential future management processes that may benefit from this kind of further understanding. And then finally, a determination of actions that could be taken to bolster community resilience with a clear delineation, again, between those that are either within or beyond the council's authorities. And again, all of, especially here 3 and 4 are tools or processes that could be used with existing pieces of council work as well. I think those things are sort of can be a little integrated. So we might come back to this slide again, but I'll just keep on trucking for the time being. And so the project activities that are sort of elucidated in the proposal that are connected to this project are sort of these main pieces of work would be starting with building out an online dashboard that integrates economic, demographic, and fisheries data at the fishing community level. But this would actually start with a survey or audit of available indices and data products, such as indices of fishing community well-being and vulnerability and resilience to changes in availability of fishery resources. And it's possible that an audit or a survey like this would reveal that such resources already exist or are in progress and soon will exist, or could be knit together somehow to create something more integrated, in which case a brand new dashboard or online resource may not be entirely necessary. So we're sort of, I think there's this important chunk of work that needs to happen first to sort of see collectively what's out there and what might be most useful for the purposes of this project. But in the event that something more tailored to the council's needs does not yet exist and would benefit the council under the goals and objectives of this project, then this project would include a work stream around building out that dashboard. And that would be a pretty significant amount of work, clearly. And then from there, we would develop decision support tools using the dashboard resource or resources as sort of a foundation for that make it easier to assess how particular fishery-specific actions affect vulnerable fishing communities up and down the West Coast. And a key part of this assessment would be determining which fishing communities are most closely tied to which fisheries and whether and how those communities are then affected by particular fishery management actions. These decision tools would then be coupled or paired with the development or identification of procedures, if those procedures already exist, that can help spotlight or front load this information and any related analyses into council decision making. And this part especially, I think, would involve consulting with council advisory bodies to more clearly identify council decisions and decision processes that most directly impact community resilience. And then once these tools and procedures are identified and developed, the council would then apply them to at least one council action to be initiated prior to the end of the grant period, so before the end of 2027. And I think it's probably, I think, extra important to note here that there is a lot of incredible work being done or currently getting underway in various places throughout NIMS that could or already does connect to this project, including work being done at the science centers under the Climate, Ecosystem, and Fisheries Initiative, or CEFI, and elsewhere. And it will be, I think, very, very helpful and beneficial for the sort of the project to chunk of work to stay in touch with those pieces of work happening elsewhere and the people doing that work as we get things rolling on this end, on the council side of things. And then finally here for the overview, we just have a very tentative timeline, or straw person, or straw cat, as some people might call it. And this couldn't be more sketchy at this point. It's definitely like this is all subject to slippage, but for winter and spring 2025, I think that's when we would be looking at doing that sort of survey of available data products for the next few months. And I should back up and say that I think a lot of this project it's envisioned that this particular project would be reliant on or maybe relatively more reliant on hiring contractors to work with the council on implementing some of these pieces or developing some of these pieces, excuse me. Then starting in maybe June of this year and sort of moving into the beginning of 2026 would be if it's identified as an important piece of the puzzle, to then develop the community resilience dashboard that's described in the project. And I'll just note that within that time frame, September 2025 is I believe the first scheduled update to the council on this project. It's currently shaded on the year at a glance, but that's when it's sort of tentatively anticipated to come before the council for just an update, no decisional points necessarily. And then just sort of moving through in maybe March of 2026, so a little over a year from now, council would potentially review the dashboard if one is developed. And then beyond that, for the next several months after that, would be the development of the decision support tools and the foregrounding processes described earlier. And then in March of 2027, the council could then review those tools and processes and select an action to which it would like to apply these processes. And then for the remainder of 2027, the application of the tools and processes to the council action would unfold through the regular council process. And nested within each of these items would be a continuous consultation and communication with the council's advisory bodies and the council itself through other update touch points. And I think that's it, although I will note that this particular timeline starts to get pretty scrunched towards the end. So it's something that we may want to sort of, I don't know, it's definitely, everything is up for review, discussion, tailoring, tweaking, etc., editing, wholesale changes. So, but it's just April to November does not leave a lot of opportunity to actually get to a decision point on a council action. But I think if it's initiated, that could also be adequate under the requirements of the proposal. So, or under what the proposal commits to doing. And I think that is the last slide regarding the overview. And I think from there we could maybe just see if there are any questions and or launch right into further discussion.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Gilly. Yeah, so feel free if you have any specific questions for Gilly on the project or questions or comments. Don't be shy. The longer you wait to raise your hands, the more you have to listen to me ramble. Go ahead, Yvonne.
So, I often worry about with projects like these is, and which we can prevent if we plan this well, is developing a sort of single purpose dashboard that is disconnected from other similar dashboards or other dashboards with West Coast information that maybe we want. And so not expecting anyone to have the answer to this, but I want to sort of throw out the idea of if we're going to do this through PSMFC, and it seems logical that we do, what other data portals and products does PSMFC have that we can sort of piggyback onto or make sure there are connections to? I don't know if this is making any sense, but I just want to make sure that we are mindful of connections that could be made as we go along so that somebody who wants to think about the effects of an action on fishing communities has similar or easy access to other, I guess, habitat information, fisheries data, what have you, from the same source. And please let me know if that didn't make sense.
No, thanks, Yvonne. I think that made great sense, and I'm definitely fond of combining and building off of existing tools rather than creating new ones. Go ahead, Koi.
Yeah, thanks, Tommy and Yvonne. That I've been thinking about that since the discussion of this project has come up, and I think I saw Brett on, who is part of the PACFEM project that is happening, that really started looking at putting together information for offshore wind and marine spatial planning efforts, but they are doing a tremendous job of evaluating all of the fishery data that we have and putting it into a dashboard that I think is going to be really useful for many things, but it could be a great starting point for this work rather than developing a whole new dashboard that looks at logbook data and fish ticket data and how much is landed where in ports and economics. And I think that it could, with some good additions, probably fill out this project pretty well.
Yeah, good point, Gwei. Thanks for that. Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, I guess similar thoughts, and I know I'm kind of, and I'll be quick, and I think Karin might want to respond to that, but like, what's the difference between dashboards and I think it was our initiative too when we were trying to make more use of the indicators from the IEA. So, I mean, can we think about this almost like fleshing out the social, economic, community resilience part of the IEA as another very similar product where, you have indicators of certain things you care about and hoping you can see whether those indicators you'd expect them to change or not, depending on what alternative you choose. So yeah, maybe along the similar lines of Yvonne's, what else out there? I think, doesn't the IEA intend to serve a similar purpose. And they're indicators.
Yeah, thanks, Corey. Go ahead, Karin.
Yeah, I think that all of us would like to have non-redundant tools. And certainly any work that comes to Pacific States would be done with that objective in mind of creating value add products rather than recreating the wheel. And Corey just mentioned the IEA dashboard / website. Gwei has mentioned the PACFEM dashboard, which is fantastic, but is we're struggling right now with how to kind of bifurcate it into confidential level query tool and a public facing query tool. And you all know enough about the data to understand that's going to be a challenge. But I think my point really is that I personally don't have strong clarity on how this project is different from those other projects. And I think rather than focus on whether a dashboard or a particular tool is the right thing, what is it substantively that the EWG, the EAS, the council wants from this project so that we have clarity on the outcome and we can then work collaboratively on the best way to get there. And maybe everyone on this webinar has clarity on what that outcome is, but I certainly don't. And I think that would be something to kind of focus on.
Yeah, thanks, Karin. And it's always great to hear from you. I think that's a very good point of, keep our eye on the prize. At least my initial thoughts on this is a lot of the tools we have, like the IA tools, IEA dashboard or products, are looking at what's happened in the past and current trends. I would like to see something that's kind of forward looking and would have that historical data, but also could be used for management purposes, such as if there's due to new research, there's the likelihood of a decline in a given fishery in a given area, so that you could then model out, what does a 10% decline in the catch of a certain fish species, how does that impact fishing communities along the coast, things of that sort. Or if council's proposing, increasing a fishery or decreasing a fishery, what are the potential impacts and what are the communities that are most affected? Which is a lot of arm waving and easy to say, but yeah. And Gwei, did you have another question, or is that a residual hand?
Nope, sorry, I forgot it doesn't go down.
Oh, no worries. All right. So apparently we're either, we're all either a little blind on this, or else we're all very confident, or everyone's a little sleepy after lunch, or looking forward to lunch, depending on your eating habits. But the discussion isn't coming fast and furious, so I'll try to nudge things along. Oh, there we go. Just had to ramble for a while. Go ahead, Alan.
Hey, Tommy, I appreciate your point around, the forward-looking nature of things and the possibilities there. One concept or one question is, whether or not this tool, and this would probably largely be capacity and funding based, is if it's, dynamic in the sense that, you've got some sort of slider bars that allow you to, explore those kind of scenarios where you're looking at quotas going up or down on any particular species and what its impact would be across various ports along the coast, or if we're really talking about like a static informational page that doesn't have any dynamic natures to it. It's really sort of highlighting 1, 2, or 3 potential scenarios where, you know, what you see is what you get. But, you know, there's obviously a lot of factors that would play into whether or not you could make a tool that's dynamic in that way, but certainly worth, you know, getting clarity in terms of what that vision would be and functionality overall.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, I guess it's similar on the functionality, and not to, I don't want to put Jamil on the spot, but, you know, it reminds me of part of the, you know, the hope for these planning sessions was to, you know, learn more about, you know, what the science centers are doing with the IRA projects and in related activities that they've been doing for a while. So I'm keying in on the term decision support tool. And yeah, Tommy, on your earlier point, it kind of implies that, you know, not just having indicators of the past year, these tools will at least help you think about projecting outcomes and evaluating alternatives based on various trade-offs and the like. But yeah, just in terms of I'm focusing on what does a decision support tool look like, and yeah, at some point, I still think we would hope to have some more discussion about the decision support tools that the science centers are working on. We've been having some email discussion, coincidentally, at WFW about what's going on in the North Pacific and that kind of thing. So yeah, what could the decision tools look like? What would be helpful? What other people working on?
Thanks, Corey. Go ahead, Whitney.
Thanks, Tommy. I like the points people are making about using tools that already exist, hearing off of what already exists, maybe even just expanding upon it. I think in general, we all know that having duplications of the same information in various areas can make it difficult for the public to, you know, understand where we're getting information from. The point I actually rose my hand for was to tear off of Alan's comment. I think, and I probably speak for the GMT at least in this capacity, but I think we would be interested in whether it's possible to get that dashboard to have a confidential access side of it, sort of how PacFin currently has the Apex dashboard, where I expect that if this tool is meant to be public facing, the data will need to be aggregated up to protect data confidentiality. So for those of us who are on the decision analysis side of things, it might be helpful to be able to look at a more fine scale if we need to, if we already have, you know, access to that confidential data being pulled somewhere else. But if it's, you know, condensed into this economic support tool, we might, it might make it more efficient for us to just pull the data straight from there. So yeah, just want to put that out there.
Thanks, Whitney. Go ahead, Yvonne.
So I just wanted to go back to an earlier part of the conversation and double check. Gilly, I'm not sure if you're the only council staffer on the line today, but this proposal was put together and submitted by council staff, and I think it was reviewed by the committee of the whole last January. And so I think I would appreciate hearing more from council staff about the intended purpose of this dashboard. Like, I mean, it sounds like it could be interesting to people who want to go and look at it, but what do you want to use it for? And once we know what you want to use it for, then we can go and think about things like what other dashboards it should be connected to, or how the data should be organized, or what other information could contribute to it. So could we get some background on that?
Sure, thank you, Yvonne. That's a great question. And there are a couple of other staff on the line as well. I think not to put Kit on the spot, but I think he may also have some insights here that could be helpful. But I think my understanding is that a significant sort of impetus for this is a desire for the council to have a better understanding, or just to have a more comprehensive understanding ahead of time as it's making decisions regarding how those decisions are going to affect the socioeconomic experience of fishing communities in a way that can sort of help to perhaps, I don't know, maybe sort of better address some national standard 8 work across different FMPs, but just basically improving its ability to know or more adequately guess perhaps how council actions are going to affect the sort of the health and resilience of communities on the socioeconomic side, as opposed to just the straight up sort of council managed resource side. So it's I think it's a way for improving the council's ability to make decisions that in a way that considers those impacts. And I don't know to the extent to which it would then change the way decisions are made, or if it would be just a way of sort of knowing what might be coming down the pike in 5 years, 10 years, et cetera, as a result of certain decisions. Or if it's, it could also, of course, be used as an opportunity to have conversations about what, those desired outcomes could or should be. But I might know just enough to get myself into trouble. So I don't know whether maybe if Kit would have any additional thoughts on that, since he was a little more present for the development of the projects themselves, or the proposals themselves, excuse me.
Yeah, no, I think Gilly gave a good explanation. I would say, so as I think most of you are aware, this is, I guess you could say, inspired by the FEP initiative. I can never remember the numbers, but there's the one that's more or less around the issue of community vulnerability / resilience. And my recollection is, we had some staff brainstorming sessions when we were rushing to put together the proposals that ultimately got submitted. And that's where this idea of a dashboard emerged, based on some examples from other parts of the country. But I would just endorse what Gilly says. I think the point here is to have information. So it's really probably the more important aspect of this project is, this second part that's sort of vaguely described as decision support, but, ways for the council to have a more nuanced understanding of if, a particular proposed action, what are the effects on communities, and what is the status of the communities, so you could sort of, if you want to get into the concepts around environmental justice, that would there be a disproportionate impact on the communities that have been identified as particularly vulnerable, I guess. So I guess in that regard, going back to Tommy's recommendation earlier of something, that could be a little, in that sense, maybe a little forward looking, I guess, or would be the basis for that kind of ability to evaluate the effects of council action. So anyways, I hope that provides a little context.
Great, thanks, Kit. I guess along those lines, we got thinking along with the data, the survey of existing data, things of that sort. Be great if there's a couple case studies or examples of where there's evidence of council decision and how it affected communities, because I think that'll help kind of set the context for folks when they're looking at this as to what we're trying to do. And that's easy for me to ask because I'm not the one who will have to do it. Is that a residual hand, Yvonne?
Yes, sorry.
Oh, no worries. Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, I guess Kit, your response made me think, just by coincidence, there was a Jason Cope's groundfish stock assessment open house thing this morning, and they're talking about measuring the importance and value of fisheries, which made me look back to what is produced like every spec cycle for groundfish and the IOPAC model estimates by alternative, which takes some estimating of what's going to change in terms of amount landed or the number of recreational trips taken. So okay, yeah, I guess Kit, what's the difference? To me, when it's like we have those IOPAC communities, the one difference would be maybe more identifying which ones we think have certain socioeconomic characteristics. But yeah, then updating those things to do an analysis of alternatives is not insubstantial effort to do that. But so I guess almost one vision is like, here's just a snapshot of what your communities and their characteristics look like, versus something like that Tommy was talking about, of something like that IOPAC analysis of alternatives to look at the differences in economic activity between them, which takes a lot of work to update, you'd think.
Yeah, I'd say probably, like you said, the one side would be that sort of being able to discriminate among communities in terms of their status. And then I guess, IOPAC, it's not that I understand it all that much, but it's sort of an econometric model looking at a so-called input-output model. So it's looking at just one dimension of effects, and primarily how it affects the outputs are income and employment impacts. And you could imagine you might want something maybe a little more nuanced. I don't know. But I think fair point. I think there's a lot of scope here, obviously, for figuring out exactly what this is about and what would bring the most value.
Thanks, Kit. Go ahead, Alan.
Yeah, just thinking about Yvonne's comment, which I think is really salient here, and obviously Kit's explanation of the intentions of this project overall, and thinking about those two comments together, what exists out there already, and where does it fall short in answering some of the questions or enabling some of the decisions that want to be made in regards to that information. What are those gaps? And where are those shortcomings? Would be really valuable for understanding, if a new dashboard needs to be made or not, or how. And the other sort of follow up on that is wondering if this project requires a new dashboard to be made, or is there room or scope in the project to work on other existing dashboards out there or systems out there, to improve them to the degree that it would benefit the objectives of this project. I mean, also recognizing that it seems like there's additional data out there that folks are wanting to bring into, these types of analyses, but again, not wanting to be redundant, thinking about how to potentially improve existing systems or dashboards that are already out there.
Great, thanks, Alan. Go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, so I was going to ask, I guess, whether people have, the EWG or people that are involved with it have given much thought to how they're going to define communities. I mean, if you look at the different sort of tools that are out there, Corey just mentioned IOPAC, which is at that IOPAC port level, which is kind of port groups that are roughly along the lines of counties. The tool for the social vulnerability and dependent stuff that is featured in the IEA. There you have a dashboard, but those communities are defined at the census place level, which is a much finer scale. And people are assigned to a community based on where they live as opposed to where they fish. I just pasted in another tool from our fishery participation survey, which we do some mapping at the county level. That data could be potentially mapped at other geographic scales. So I think early on, it would be useful to for the council to think about how they want to define communities. What's the most useful? Is it the IOPAC community or something else?
Yeah, thanks, Al. All right, thanks, Dan. That's definitely been a question in the back of my mind of how we define community, and especially given it's not just people living next to the coast, but with rec fisheries in particular, but even commercial fisheries, people are highly mobile, moving up and down the coast. And yeah, I think it'd also be good to get some advice from nymphs as well. If there's any guidance there on how National Standard 8 is, or how communities are interpreted under national standards. So, I'm assuming that's a residual hand, Alan? Yeah, thank you. All right. See if there's any other broad questions. Otherwise, just so you know, some of us EWG folks have been taking notes and have started to compile a list of some different tools and dashboards that we are aware of. If folks have something that they want to have flagged for this, but don't really may not want to speak up about it, feel free to put a link in the chat and we can add it to our notes. Dan's ahead of me on that. And go ahead, Abigail.
Thanks, Tommy. I was curious, you mentioned that you wanted a broader suite of ideas about impacts than just employment and income. And I'm wondering if you have some first pass ideas of what kinds of incomes what kinds of impacts or what kinds of outcomes you're interested in. So what that broader what might look like, and what kinds of data might need to go into that.
I personally don't. This is where I know in the SSC in particular, we've had a fair bit of discussion around needing more social scientists. And I know enough to know that I don't know very much about that. I don't even know how to frame the question well, but I think we do have a discussion point around needed capacity and expertise, and I think social scientist is definitely one of them. And looks like Gilly can bail me out here. Go ahead, Gilly.
I don't know about that, but you did not need any bailing out at all. But I just thought I would chime in here real quick. And Abigail, thank you for that question. I think that is definitely one of the sort of initial questions that needs to be definitely further explored. I think some of the things that have just sort of popped up in very initial, I don't know whether they're conversations or just sort of some back and forth informally, are things like, in addition to income and employment related indices or things that you're measuring, but things like other measures of community wellness or health, maybe things around education or functionality of governance or municipal bond investments in communities, or things that are generally sort of, I guess, broadly understood to sort of help show how a community is doing. And I, as similar to what Tommy was just saying, I am incredibly unfamiliar and uninformed in these areas, and so for me it's definitely a little bit of just like, oh, I think I heard somebody say something once about education levels or school enrollment or that sort of thing, but yes, I think that just points to the fact that there needs to be some sort of figuring out like who we might need to be in touch with on these projects, and maybe also bringing in some external expertise as well, just because these projects in general are they have nice, robust budgets attached to them, which is great. Thank you very much, Inflation Reduction Act. And there is an anticipation of, or an expectation of, that there would be contractor assistance for some of this work as well. So being able to sort of identify places where we as a council family are needing more outside assistance is going to be critical as well. But yes, I'll stop there. And I'm sure there are people on this call who I'm sure are infinitely more familiar with all the different things that you can be measuring to sort of understand the bigger picture.
Yeah, thanks, Gilly. And Sarah Klein in the chat had raised a point earlier of there's kind of any number of, sorry, I had copied it into my notes and then lost it. Internal and external factors that could impact resilience on multi-scalar systems and fishing communities. And so I think also, while I think one thing that the project moving forward needs to work with the council on is defining, how we're looking at communities, but also maybe consider some guardrails of, we can't do everything for everyone, so we may have to put a few limits on what we're doing, and just have some clearly stated assumptions would be important. All right. Seeing a slowdown in hands. Again, go ahead, Sarah.
Sorry, I'm still trying to learn where the raising hand button is. I just wanted to chime in that I've been reading a lot of literature about social indicators and human well-being, and Sarah Jo Breslow out of UW has a great paper. I can put a link to it. This is on, I think it's connected with the integrated ecosystem assessment work and ecosystem-based management. But I found this review that Breslow et al. Wrote to be a great starting point for thinking about social indicators and their connection to community resilience. So there's a lot of academic literature on this. I guess the only thing I want to say is, there's a lot of uncertainty in understanding this topic in a lot of different dimensions. So I hope that people realize, you still have to use these tools with a lot of judgment. They can't take judgment out of decision, and we can't just rely on a model to get to a decision outcome. It can certainly inform the council's process, but I think we just have to be careful with what these kind of tools and indicators and dashboards can promise, especially when we're thinking about something that appears to be you want this to be really generalizable. And that's such a tough balance to achieve that generalizability with enough local nuance to be locally meaningful. So I'll just stop there.
Great. Thanks, Sarah. Well said. All right. So kind of looking at carrying forward in the logic that makes sense to me. Just kind of looking at the project timeline. Gilly has up on the screen the project activities. I was looking at the table of activities in the project proposal PDF that was shared during the last council meeting and is on the meeting website. I'd put in the chat earlier. Major things we have coming up initially. I think probably best place to focus our effort is on kind of looking at the activities planned for the next year, because then that'll shape what follows on. Things that are supposed to be happening here through the spring and into the summer, the survey of available data products. I think it's definitely something that the council family can contribute to, and also make recommendations for outside expertise that might be able to support that. And then also through that data products, that'll inform how the building of the dashboard would look. Like, are we updating an existing tool or starting fresh from somewhere? If we're updating an existing tool, there also needs to be discussions on ownership of that dashboard to make sure that whoever we do this with can sustain it into the future, or what the implications will be. And then one that's not on Gilly's PowerPoint but was on this thing was the identify and categorize fishery management actions and linkages to specific fishing communities. I think this kind of might be a subset of the available data products, but it is something that was scheduled to start would start in July of 2025. So something that would be coming up and could be informed by now. But for the next kind of 6 to 9 months, the bulk of the work is around these survey of available data products and informing what this dashboard would look like, kind of advice on what direction to take. So hopefully I've summarized that well. Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, I guess. Well, I think it was Karin who said it's something similar, but if you're going to build the dashboard or decision support tools, it seems to me you really kind of want to start backwards and figure out what the decision is or are that you're going to help support. So I guess and here another thing, and then you just covered it again, Tommy, but Kit's explanation of one purpose is just kind of better understanding which actions affect which communities more or less. That's almost not, that's just maybe more of an analysis rather than a dashboard of like, hey, let's look at which decisions have happened in the past and then try to allocate the impacts spatially and into the other, into the other characteristics of these places. But yeah, again, the only thing the schedule is, I think you kind of want to start with what decisions you're aiming at first, almost, or not first, but simultaneously, rather than figure out at the very end which one you're going to apply it to.
Yeah, agreed. I think that's maybe something we can put into the ask of, moving forward, of not just the survey of data products, but how is this intended to be used, and by who and when, and all those good questions. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Yeah, I raised my hand. Corey was starting, but I just want to fully agree with what he said and suggest that even before that first bullet, maybe Gilly, if you could arrange an internal discussion with your colleagues on the council staff, and just ask them, what analyses are we doing that would require this kind of information, and how can we, how might we use a dashboard like this, or use this kind of information, and see what they say, like exactly what information do they want? Because we could take this off in a whole bunch of different directions, but if it would be unfortunate to do a lot of work and then find it's not something that we use.
I'll just jump in real quick and say thank you, Yvonne. I think that's a great idea, just to do like a little internal temperature taking or census, or I don't know what the right word would be, but just to sort of think about if you had your druthers as you're sort of doing analyses on behalf of the council and FMPs, et cetera, what would be useful to know going in. I think that's a great idea. And I think it's something we can for sure do early on.
Great. Thanks, Pat, and great suggestion, Yvonne. Is that a residual hand, Corey, or did you have another comment?
I have another comment for once, rather than forgetting to put it down. But the other thought is, so these are interesting ideas on these various IEA and other academic type conceptual frameworks for this stuff. But I think the decisions we make around the council are very much made within the NEPA and Magnuson frameworks, which I'm sure we could map the lingos together, and maybe that's, but yeah, so we've had, maybe some of us have had aspirations for linking the FVP to the NEPA analysis needs better. But I think, just that reality of like, we have to look at both what, the decision criteria and the analytical requirements of NEPA, and if they're going to be helpful, because those are what the decisions need to speak to make its way through the NIMS approval process. So it's kind of just a food for thought on linking the academic type stuff to the practical administrative decision making, and how can that be done better.
Yeah, good point, Corey. I always try to forget about those things. All right. Oh, another hand came up. I stalled long enough. Go ahead, Gway.
Yeah, I think it feels like we did a lot of this thinking and putting together initiative 2.6, which is what this IRA project came out of. And I don't think that we need to go back and like totally. I think going and doing some thinking and really nailing that down is good, but I don't think we need to start over. I would start with what was put together for 2.6 and then move forward and see how this IRA project fits within that.
Yeah, agreed. I think the more places we can build off of what we've done in the past, the better, and take advantage of existing tools. So, great place, a great starting point.
Well, part of the issue, probably why it's left on the initiative list, Gway, in my mind, is it wasn't specific enough to know exactly what we should be doing, unless I'm not remembering which initiative 2.6 was. But that's the trick with these things, is always, we've got these blue sky ideas. How do we make them helpful and actually used?
Yeah, Corey, though, I mean, I'm looking at the FEP appendix and reading what's written for 2.6, and there's a whole plan laid out for how the council can move forward with that initiative.
Sorry, could you put the link in the chat? I'm like not even finding the appendix.
Yep, I definitely will.
Oh, I just found it.
Go ahead, Gilly.
Well, thanks, Tommy. I was just going to chime in and say that that's definitely, I think, an excellent place to start. What Gway was just talking about, I think, is this project is, it has all of its DNA in Initiative 2.6 from the FEP appendix. And so using what work has been done around the development of that initiative concept. I know the initiative itself has not been developed as an initiative because it has not yet been moved forward, but this could hopefully be an opportunity to do exactly that, or a version thereof. And so starting there makes tons of sense. Absolutely.
Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, I don't know. Go ahead. Still not specific enough beyond maybe one, beyond Roman numeral 1. In 3. But I mean, and that is kind of very similar to what I think Yvonne and I were thinking. You got to get more specific on what actions. I think you can build 1 and 2. Yeah, I would need some more. Excuse me, I'm trying to not chew my gum while talking. But I think there's still more specifics needed.
Yeah, that's definitely an area we can build off of. Yeah, and hopefully we can get some guidance and counsel on the specifics, or at least some useful suggestions. Seeing a slowdown in hands, and we're kind of narrowing down to some specific areas of discussion. Other areas we have to think about is we've gone over project timeline and kind of around the roles and responsibilities, and then kind of required expertise, some of those types of thoughts. So how we propose to move forward with project 1 is rather than having the full EWG and EAS kind of track and engage fully on all of these, instead forming some type of a subcommittee that then reports back, and just basically looking for volunteers who might want to be part of that. And ideally this would have expertise, it would be open to other advisory bodies, folks who would want to join in and contribute. And I think these could be fairly fluid groups, because our first steps here are looking at like available data products and clarifying, kind of how council might use these tools, and do we need a new dashboard, or do we have recommendations to build off an existing one? So I think we can kind of move our discussion that direction. Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, and I think we talked about this whenever we talked about this last, but I think rather than survey available data products, it's kind of similar, but I think the more, and I can't remember which one of us recommended this last time, but the more specific task to me is figuring out, like, if you look at the FEP appendix languages, what are the attributes that you'd want to look at for measuring or describing community resilience? So it's more than just the data, but you'd want some experts thinking about what attributes to look at along the lines of the stuff Jamil and Sarah put into the chat. So that is part about data products, but it's really defining what you mean by resilience and how to measure it. And that would be a lot of intellectual work, I would think.
Yeah, thanks for that. I definitely didn't explain our discussion well, but yeah, I think the defining, what we mean by community, what types of resilience, and yeah, you can't really start looking for tools and data products until you know what questions you want to answer. In terms of like timing and ways forward, I think this is maybe we can get a small group together and try to get something ready for the March council meeting. And that way we can, that's the next time the ecosystem advisory bodies meet, even though project 2 isn't on the agenda. We can still kind of raise these issues and try to get council guidance sooner rather than later. Because if we wait until September, then theoretically the survey and background work is done and the dashboard work is underway. So yeah, even if we don't submit the reports in March, we can still work on drafting something. So just checking to see if that makes sense, if that's agreeable with everyone. Go ahead, Karin.
Yeah, I may have missed it, but if somebody mentioned this, but I believe that Lisa Pfeiffer is presenting to the council March 2025 on the PAC-FEM project. And so I don't know under what agenda item, but that would be a time to talk about synergy and overlap between that project and the council's desires around this one.
Great, thanks for that. Good reminder. Corey, did you have another question?
I did it again. Okay, sorry.
Oh, you could just ask a question and say, and then pretend that you left it up or erase it intentionally. It's okay.
I messed that one up.
Go ahead, Gilly, and then Jessica.
Oh, thank you. I just wanted to say thanks to Karin for flagging that. I think that's great that Lisa Pfeiffer will be presenting a little bit on PAC-FEM and that, yeah, because I feel like there are some there are some places where a lot of this kind of work is obviously being built out already, and that's one of them. And so that'll be, I think, an excellent opportunity to talk about what it is and what we think we might want to do that might be the same or different. And anyway, yeah, great thing to have in our quivers for thinking about March. Thank you.
Thanks, Gilly. Do you have a comment, Jessica?
Yeah, I guess I'll weigh in, Tommy. I want to echo that overlap and synergy between this project and potentially PAC-FEM and additional, resources that might be needed to be added to or, to supplement that and not reinventing the wheel. So pretty much echoing all the conversations I'm hearing, but part of that is also thinking about really focusing in maybe between now and March, I wonder, on those questions that are needing to be asked and the definitions that are needed to answer those questions, like hearing some of this, defining of communities and where the strengths of each definition lies. And so like between now and that March, presentation would be a good action, maybe moving forward for a focused group to really think about what are the questions, what are the definitions, and so on. So just wanted to add that 2 cents.
Thanks, Jessica. Much appreciated. Go ahead, Corey.
That's good. So Jessica, are you saying we kind of need a roadmap?
You know I love a roadmap, Corey.
But more seriously, well, I mean, one potential use I thought you were going to get to, and you were, maybe it was just the connection to the offshore wind. A dashboard like this, with the PAC-FEM project might go a long way in fulfilling would be, what are the socioeconomic consequences of developing offshore wind as well, and those other cumulative impacts types of questions we've been working on.
Yeah, and I think, Corey, my point, and I didn't want to spoiler alert, my opinion is that PAC-FEM is going to be an extremely useful tool for a multitude of council decisions. And since this whole idea around community resilience decision support tools for the council has not only revenue components, but then thinking about how to expand that farther from ex-vessel revenue, I think is really the cool connection that could be made. But that's just based on my current understanding of the PAC-FEM tool and being a huge proponent of it, from offshore wind to just other decisions and across the fishery management spectrum.
Great. Thanks for that. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Thanks. I think so, Jessica. Appreciate you sort of bringing all this back sort of circling it around, and it looks like there's lots of great links in the chat to all of these different tools. So I'm normally don't say this, but I think we need a bit of a, I'm hearing maybe we need a bit of a pause. And by that, I mean, just like really dedicate the next couple months to figuring out why we want this. And then when we get the report out on the PACFEM tool, okay, is that, you know, already doing what we wanted to do? Is this thing that that Abigail Golden dropped in the chat from Carmen Norman, is that doing what we wanted to do? It's probably not doing everything that we need, but maybe these existing tools are already doing some of what we need, and we could focus on additions that need to be made to those. So let's make this winter about that big conversation about exactly what information is needed for council analyses, and then we'll be better prepared to understand what information is available. You know, if PACFEM was developed for BOEM analyses, it can't be too far off from what we need, or, you know, have too much going on that would be irrelevant to us. So let's just give a deep think over what we need, and then start working on designing around the existing dashboards and databases. Thanks.
Yeah, very well said, Yvonne. Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, no, I raised my hand before Yvonne finished, but I think just that I would, and maybe sorry, I can't say Jamil. Jamil would speak up here, but I think that deep think would include like something like what his comment from 1:19 p.m. was about, you know, picking a framework, coming up with someone, whoever's doing this, coming up with their own framework, and then figuring out, yeah, what do you want to, what information do you want, what is available already and where. But just like, yeah, I think that framework would be part of the deep think. But
yeah, I'm not sure that Jamil can unmute himself. He's showing up as not having a microphone, so we'll have to.
There's two of me. I can speak up. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, look at that. You're everywhere.
Yeah. I took a page out of Andre Punt's book. Thanks. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I think the framework question is really related to points that Yvonne first raised, and then Corey echoed, and then Yvonne thirded, I think, which is like, what decisions does project 2 intend to support? And then if we know that, we can look to frameworks around social, economic, and other indicators to determine how to adequately represent the different components of human well-being that relate to those decisions. So I feel like those two need to go in lockstep. We need to know what decisions are being supported, and we need a framework for thinking about which indicators to gather. And then I'll just echo something Yvonne said most recently, but others like Jessica have said as well, which is we can use that approach to determine how to not be duplicative of existing information and tools that are out there.
Excellent, thank you. Let's see, you got a hand up. Go ahead, Yvonne.
Sorry, I'm really bad at these residual hands.
You had the opportunity to cover and just bluff your way through it. Make up a question on the fly. All right, so it looks like we have, you know, kind of a circling around an agreement on ways forward, and yeah, kind of clarifying what this is going to be before we do too much work. And at least in my mind, I think this is a very solid way forward. I guess to that end, are there any volunteers for this kind of subcommittee focus group, you know, task force, roadmap developers, whatever we want to call it? And you can speak up or put your name in the chat. And also moving forward, this is something especially for EWG to think about, and can be in part of our March report of, do we need to request additional expertise be added to the EWG to help, in particular with this project, or, are we doing well enough of just bringing in outside expertise as needed? Apparently asking for volunteers is a surefire way to get everyone to clam up.
I just put a quick thing in the chat that if people wanted to ponder further or let it marinate, you can also just, oh, way, hooray.
Okay. And I guess also, just because ideally any type of report of this nature would be available for the advanced briefing book. So in reality, we have kind of, next week, January, and the first week of February or so to kind of come up with any type of recommendations. So we would need to start, this group would need to start meeting in early next year. And I'm not sure if this would fall under needing to be publicly noticed or not. Like, if this group is just drafting, is just a drafting group pulling together some ideas that will then later be reviewed. If that's when I'll let Gilly speak internally with council on if we can just organize an ad hoc meeting, or if we need to publicly notice it. But just thinking of the various joys of federally noticed meetings. All right, and you're welcome to join, Sarah. Or I will say you're welcome to join as an outside expert. And having Gwei on board is always great. For the ecosystem advisory bodies, I can help out as I can. I know I don't have a huge amount of time in January. Happy to help out. Is there anyone who wants to? I guess Gwei's on EWG, so we've got EWG covered. Anyone on the EAS who is keen to jump in on this? And if not, definitely can reach out to Gilly or myself or both, and we'll put together a mailing list on this. All right. All right. WWF is pondering. I'm assuming California is doing the same. And yeah, and I'll talk internally as well. This might be something that someone else within the tribal world might want to weigh in on more than just myself. All right. I guess with that, is there other pressing issues? Otherwise, I'll look at Michelle and Teresa from the EAS to see if they have any comments they want to add, and we can look at getting a chunk of our afternoon back. Go ahead, Gilly.
Oh, thanks, Tommy. I also just wanted to flag that there, I think, will be some just ongoing conversations between folks who are focused on sort of figuring out this project and the work that that the science centers are doing that may sort of relate to some of this work. And those are not formal conversations that have been scheduled or anything like that, but just making sure that we're staying in touch with Abigail and Jamil and Dan and others who are thinking a lot about this on the NIMS and Science Center side, just because I think there could be some really interesting connections and linkages. And we just, again, this all sort of, I think, probably goes back to the wanting to make sure that we're making the most of everyone's time and certainly resources, and then also not wanting to reinvent too many wheels at the same time, but also that there might be some really nice synergies that might unfold here in the next couple of years, due in part to this sort of infusion of assistance through the IRA funds. So just making sure that we're, I've heard the term walking together a lot lately, so perhaps we will walk together. I hope so anyway. So anyway, just wanted to flag that connection as well. It's come up a little bit already, but wanted to circle back again.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Kelly. Go ahead, Jamil.
I agree with that comment, Gilly, for sure. I raised my hand to ask Tommy if you could clarify what the request you made is, and maybe even like type in the chat or a follow-up email would be helpful. Just I saw people are pondering, but just wanting to know like what level of engagement and contributions are being requested so that I can think about it a bit more concretely.
Yeah, I guess not fully fleshed out, but it's informal, task force working group, friends of the chair group, to take the, flesh out some recommendations and questions for council on how would this tool be used, what are their priorities, and basically shaping this a bit more before we start digging into the data tools. And so this would be a very informal group, and people could come and go, and the report would either be, would either come out as a staff I'd imagine either come out as a staff report or through the EWG or EAS. So probably about as clear as mud. And then there will be further chance for public comment and advisory body engagement for those not on this task force, at the March meeting and as things move forward, because I'm very keen on trying to keep all the different groups engaged and get their input as quick as we can. Go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, no, I thanks Gilly for bringing that up. There's some risk of everyone being so busy with this stuff that everyone's off in there doing stuff and not talking to each other, but we appreciate the spirit heard from you in figuring this out. And yeah, more specifics, I can Jamil and the Science Center's end of how they could be helpful with this too would be great. This is less weighty of a comment, but I think the other connection that popped in my mind before, but I forgot to say was, would there be any benefit to focusing this project on the same action as the first project? That one, first one's about flexibility, doing things better or quicker or whatever, but and this one's about understanding the effects on communities. And yeah, could it be the same action? Just a thought there. I don't know if that would be less or more efficient, but the goals of helping decision making and action are there in common.
Yeah, definitely. I imagine it'd be kind of hard to do these two independent, efficiency and decision making and informed decisions tend to go together. So yeah, it'd be great to keep these kind of harmonized and working together. Go ahead, Gilly.
Yes, thanks, Tommy, and thanks, Corey, for that idea. I think that there's so many linkages between the three IRA projects where there will be some sort of crosswalking that happens naturally, and then I think the idea of just sort of wondering, could we benefit from kind of pairing things up a little bit? And I know that there's a fair amount of thinking around that, just sort of informally so far between Project 1 and Project 3. Stay tuned for the further conversation on that for next week. But regarding, just sort of the EFP framework question that's elucidated or asked in Project 3, and how that can become sort of like an efficiency or streamlining, sort of a focal point for that kind of work under the Project 1 umbrella. But then I feel like Project 2 kind of could go in all the directions. So yeah, being able to sort of like connect these things up a little bit towards the beginning would be great. And that reminds me just also that the Project 2 proposal and sort of the way things are laid out in the overview that from this afternoon definitely envisions this sort of the selection of a council action or, you know, sort of question or decision that needs to be made as sort of the last installment of the work flow or sort of the order of things. And I just wanted to acknowledge that a couple of folks have I think very wisely suggested that asking that question up front could be very, very helpful. Front loading that question would be an interesting way to proceed so that we know what we're trying to answer before we start figuring out how best to answer it. So I just wanted to acknowledge that I've written that down and underlined it a couple of times just as a you know, a potential shift from the way things were sort of described earlier, but a very helpful way to maybe revisit the best way forward on this. So thanks for that.
Great. Thanks, Gilly. So I guess it looked to Teresa and Michelle, see if the EAS has any has any comments or thoughts, and then we'll open up for public comment so I don't forget that again.
Thanks, Tommy. I'll just say I really appreciate all of the discussion. I learned a lot about the existing tools that are out there and that are in development, and I look forward to learning more. And I really appreciate the summary and proposed course of action that Yvonne laid out for next steps. And I'll get together with Teresa, and I'm sure we'll be able to tag team on participating on the subcommittee work so that we have an EAS present. So thanks.
Yeah, thanks.
Great, thank you.
This is Teresa. I'll echo what Michelle said, and maybe you know, I'd like to talk with the EAS to see who has interest in being on the sort of small group working groups for the different projects. In my brain, I'm trying to figure out if it's best to have the same person so that you can make those cross connections, or whether it's good to find the person with the most relevant expertise for each group. So, you know, look forward to having that discussion with the EAS, but definitely we'll have participation in the small group from us.
Great, thank you. All right, is it look now to see if there's any public comment? Noting we are well ahead of time, but it is also Friday, so I'm sure no one will begrudge getting a couple hours back. All right, not seeing any hands, and we have had some public comment throughout, so wasn't really expecting much. Just once again, see if there's anyone here, any closing comments, thoughts. Otherwise, feel free to reach out to Gilly and myself if you have questions, comments, or an urge to volunteer to do more work. And we'll try to keep everyone posted on where things are going. Go ahead, Carrie.
Thanks, Tommy. Yeah, regarding the PACFEM tool, I heard someone say, maybe it was Karen, that Lisa Pfeiffer would be presenting to the council in March. I'm not aware of plans for that to be presented to the council itself, but possibly to the SSC for a review, and then probably for the Marine Planning Committee's meeting, which would be 5 or 6 weeks ahead of the March meeting. So just wanted to clarify, if you want to hear more about it, those are two likely opportunities.
Great, thanks, Carrie. And if there's enough interest, and if it's all right with Karen and company, maybe we could try to record the presentation to the Marine Planning Committee, just in case folks can't join that meeting.
Yes, sir. All MPC meetings are actually recorded and then posted to the page, so consider it done.
Perfect. Thank you, sir. All right. Looking for any other hands or comments? Oh, Gilly's on it. Go ahead, Gilly.
Oh, thank you so much. And Carrie's comment just then reminded me that similarly or sort of parallelly, I think there is some hope or talk of trying to set up a briefing of some kind regarding the new environmental justice community explorer tool that I think somebody that was both mentioned and I think also included in the chat as a link. And I'm not exactly, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but I think there is a hope that there will be a chance for folks to be able to tune into or watch a recording of a briefing that just sort of walks through it and talks about how cool it is and all the amazing things it does, and to maybe bring some of that thinking forward into this larger conversation about what exists and how can we make sure that we're leveraging what's already out there and maybe tailoring things accordingly. So, and there will hopefully be more on that at some point soon. And we'll, and some sort of email blast would go around if there is a briefing scheduled. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Gilly. All right. Not seeing any other hands, but if folks want, I can drag this out longer. That's one thing the EWG is good at, is rambling and making sure that a meeting takes up all of its allocated time. But all right, I guess happy Friday, everyone. Thanks for coming out. I think we had really good discussion, and I personally am feeling, still not fully certain on this, on everything about the project, but I think our next steps forward are, definitely in the right direction, and we'll be reaching out to those who volunteered or that we want to volunteer to join. Enjoy your weekend. Stay dry for those, at least in the Pacific Northwest. Not sure how the weather's looking down south, and thanks again.
Thanks, Tommy. Thanks, Gilly.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you.